Before I get to talking about this, I just want to make one thing very clear. When this book received a boatload of criticism from like every corner of the internet, the first thing that I thought was like, oh, it's probably pretty justified, right? Because most of these book talk sort of books that get really trendy, they end up being pretty poorly written with nothing interesting going on. Now, from what I've seen, this book is no exception. This book has received so much criticism for the writing, for the characters, for the story. I'm going to be honest, I don't really get it. Hold on. Let me make my case here. Let me make my case, okay? Because I came into this book absolutely ready to hate it. And compared to a Court of Thorns and Roses, this book is so much better, it's not even funny. The main criticism being that the main character in this book, Violet, is severely unlikable and kind of annoying. I totally get it. It's totally justifiable criticism. I'm not taking that away from you. But let me just kind of work you through my thought process and kind of what I liked about this book and what I didn't like about this book. Just to get this out of the way, this book it's a romantasy book, unsurprisingly, and written in the first person. It features pretty much my favorite trope in all of romantasy or romance fiction or whatever the genre. And that is the enemies to lovers trope. I absolutely love this trope when it's done pretty well. And in this book, it feels like it was done half-heartedly. And then by the end of the book, it doesn't feel like it's there at all. This is definitely one of those books where once I got to maybe about the midway point, like halfway through, it was significantly less interesting than the first half. I'm going to do the same thing I did in the last video where I give a general summary of the book and then I kind of point out the flaws that I see in it. So I'll just put the timestamps and you can just go to the end summary if you kind of want to hear what I didn't like about the book. For now, if you haven't read this book and you don't really want to, I'll give you a very, very botched summary of it. As I've said in every video, I do not know how to pronounce fantasy names at all. So I'm not going to look up how the author intended them to be pronounced. I'm not going to go through any of that crap. I'm just going to butcher the names and you're just going to have to live with me. The book opens up with the main character, Violet, who is, she's going to be joining basically the Writer's Quadrant, which is, in this world, there's these four quadrants that kind of dictate your job, and you kind of get assigned to one of them, blah, blah, blah. And Violet wanted to be a scribe. She wanted to go into the archives and document battles and all this crap. And due to her mother, who's like the commanding general of Lord Dragonville, she's like, no, you're going to become a writer now. And Violet is sort of sentenced to be a writer. And the thing about writers in this book is their life expectancy is abysmal. And it's not even the fact that they get on the dragons that kills them. It's the fact that the entire course of their training usually involves them getting killed or killing other people that are also training. And it's so counterintuitive that it kind of like makes you stop and think, why are we putting all of these able-bodied recruits into an area where they're almost certainly going to die, and the requirement for this bond with a dragon isn't even guaranteed to be strength-oriented? So it sort of defeats the purpose that Violet is just like put in this situation. But she's Violet Sorengale, and she's not like other girls. She has brittle bone disease, or some fantasy version of brittle bone disease, where she's inherently frail and weak and all this stuff. But this doesn't really make too much sense just out of the gate, because the first thing they kind of tell us about Violet, from her perspective, of course, is that she is actually extremely skilled with daggers. I'm not really sure how this whole like brittle bone thing is supposed to come into play like right off the bat, because I'm thinking, as soon as I open this book for the first time and I'm reading it, this chick has brittle bone disease. Her knee gets dislocated immediately. There is no way she is going to survive a spar. There's no way she's going to survive a run. There's no way she can work out in any way or capacity without harming herself severely or gaining enough strength that she needs in order to combat these people that are perfectly healthy. And as you'll come to know, most of them are bigger and stronger than her, but she's still going to figure out a way because she's the main character. That is just something I don't think is really super necessary for this book. The fact that Violet starts out with this severe handicap that almost doesn't become a handicap. She gets put into the Rider's Quadrant, and she has to go through this little ceremony where she crosses this little rock cliff thing. Her sister is also a very accomplished dragon rider. Her brother was killed during a rebellion, and her mother is basically just the devil. Her sister sort of gives her advice. She helps her. She gives her this dragon scale armor, which ends up saving her life multiple times. As the story progresses, it becomes very, very obvious that Violet almost seems to have plot armor in a quite literal sense. Her and her sister talk before she goes on her little walk about how she shouldn't try sleeping with people and blah, blah, blah. Now, while she's crossing this little chasm in order to go to the Rider's Quadrant to presumably begin the academy for the first time, she's stuck between two people, one of which is a girl whose name is, Jesus Christ, Rhiannon, basically Rihanna. Rhiannon, one of the first things Violet does is she does something extremely selfless. She gives Rhiannon one of her boots in order to help her with crossing the little rocky path so she doesn't slip off and die. She does not do the same thing to the person behind her, who is basically like, I would say this is like the first sacrificial lamb to prove how cruel these games are. Because the first thing this guy says is how he plans to get married as soon as he's back. And so you, as a reader, immediately know this guy's about to die. And he does. He dies. She also kind of encounters another character whose name is Jack. And Jack ends up becoming the sort of temporary antagonist throughout the story, where Jack is going to basically hate her for no reason whatsoever and just try to kill her at every opportunity. Now, one of the big drives, again, the first thing that sort of Violet is told by her sister is to stay away from one particular person whose name is Xaden. I hate people whose names start with X. Xaden is the son of the deceiver who led the rebellion that basically caused a whole bunch of problems. From the offset, you instantly know this is going to be your love interest. No matter how the author tries to sort of feed you little red herrings that like maybe she might not get with this guy, it is so obvious from the get-go. And this sort of leans into how Violet ends up describing this guy is, there's no easy way to say this. It almost feels like Violet is perpetually ovulating, which sounds weird, but just trust me. Every single time she looks at this guy, it is just the most horny, depraved thoughts you could possibly imagine. And that's totally fine, because the way he's described, he is the most beautiful person on the planet. He is handsome. He is tall. He is ripped. He's just absolutely so incredibly sexy that this chick cannot help herself with drooling over him constantly. Now, the problem with this is Xaden is sort of positioned as if he wants to kill Violet. And it's very, very important that Xaden, his whole goal seems to be, during the duration of their little trials to become dragon riders, is Xaden wants to kill her. For the first trial, she is almost pushed off by Jack, who is her antagonist, and she manages to just barely sort of make her way across in the nick of time, puts a knife to his balls, and basically threatens him, at which point Jack is kind of forced to back off due to the rules being that they're not allowed to harm each other in this particular instance. So Violet sort of shows her real strength in this moment, which is she has a very intricate knowledge of everything because of her time in the archives, because she's been studying to do that her whole life. She understands the codex in a way that other people don't. She basically can recite it from memory, and she knows a whole bunch of other useless facts that will just kind of randomly come up. Here comes the titular title drop, where Violet is initially sorted to be put inside Dane's squad, which is, I believe, under the second wing. I could be wrong on that. And what ends up happening is that Xaden ordered, because he's a wing leader, which means he's basically in charge of the whole, like, little, what would you call it, platoon or class. He's in charge of the fourth wing, and he orders to have her put inside his squad. And so now we kind of get this, he is her direct superior, and she kind of is at his mercy. We get introduced to this character Dane, and Dane is her childhood friend, and again, Violet just describes most men in a way that is just like, she is constantly horny. There is no other way around it. That's all that she thinks about. He's her best friend from childhood. They have a very deep connection with each other. But now things have sort of changed, because he's a third year now, or a second year, and he's been in this school that sort of, it rips away all the kindness and only leaves who you truly are, or something like that. So you get the first little bait here that Dane and Violet, they might become something, but they really don't, because Dane is by far and above the worst character in the entire book. Hands down, the most infuriating, annoying. Everything that happens later in the book, it doesn't really make me dislike the character more, because I hated him from the very beginning, and every time he shows up, it's the same thing, and it goes past concern. It's just annoying. The first thing Dane tries to do is sort of get Violet into the scribe quadrant, right? Which we have already established that Violet's mother will not let this happen. She absolutely wants her there, and if Violet tries to escape or leave or whatever, she's going to face death, or worse, she's just going to be put back at the start. Her leaving is not an option. Dane seems to believe that it is the only option. No matter how many times he's told no or that it's not going to work, he just keeps doing it, and it just makes no sense as you go through it, because he's supposed to be her squad leader. He's supposed to take care of her. But what he ends up doing is just babying her, and he babies her, I guess, so that she can sort of stand up for herself in a sense. Now, when they first meet the dragons, it's kind of funny that the first thing people do when they see the dragons is they all just kind of run away. It has been described that every student in this sort of class has been training for this their whole life. They want to become dragon riders. It is their only option to succeed, and at the sight of them, so many of them flee, and then the dragons burn them to death. This is one of those things where the book sort of starts to lose a little bit of its grounding, because apparently we're in a dire war effort right now, and every person counts. But not really, because they haphazardly kill people. They let the dragons murder whoever they want, because dragons do not follow the laws of humans, which just makes you wonder why the hell we are so tightly allied with these creatures that will just kill people for running away in fear. The first major trial that we get is that there are combat trials coming up, and so Violet is going to have to fight people, physical combat with like grown adult men and women, and these people do not have brittle bone disease. They have been training most of their life, and they are sort of planning to more or less kill her, because due to Violet's parentage, you could say, a lot of people want to prove themselves by besting her, but also every child of the rebellion people, all the people that led the rebellion, they all had kids, and every child of those is given a rebellion sort of sigil or whatever. That's like a tattoo on their skin, and it sort of marks them as a traitor, more or less. And all of those kids were required to sign up for the Riders Quadrant whenever they're old enough. They're all signed up for this, and they all kind of have a grudge specifically against Violet's mother. And due to that, they're like, okay, well, we're going to take out the grudge on Violet. Naturally, that's what you would think. When she's faced with these combat trials, it's kind of a serious issue. We're not really sure how Violet is going to survive any of these combat trials. She has brittle bone disease. She, again, broke her knee just like falling down. That's pretty concerning. That kind of makes you wonder, like, how is she going to live? They have this initial sort of like testing for the combat. This is where they're just sort of gauging whether or not people actually have the ability to fight. Now, you would think a lot of these people have been training for several years specifically for this, so they should be able to fight pretty well. Violet has not. Violet has been training for, I think, about 6 months. When Violet steps on the mat with a rebellion signet holding chick who's basically beefy and just she wants to like totally rock her world, you kind of think she might die here, because it's the only thing that would make sense. There's no way Violet should be able to take a punch. They end up tussling a little bit. They fight on the mat, and Violet basically gets her arm shattered and her shoulder dislocated because she refuses to tap out, because that would show weakness. And to be fair, that's totally fine. I'm fine with the main character sort of getting, crushed in the very, very beginning. It makes sense. Then Dane goes on this little very protective rant, and he's trying to get her out again. Violet gets her shoulder mended, which she doesn't want to have done again, because she thinks that if she keeps going to get mended over and over, people are going to see her as weak. But it doesn't really make sense when her bones break very easily. I feel like you can't just like break your arms every morning and then break your legs every night and just kind of hope for the best. Violet gets this book from Mira, and it's the book of her brother, and her brother had written down, because her brother's dead. Her brother dead. Her brother had written down a bunch of these sort of tricks and tips, like Brennan's Declassified School Survival Guide for Dragons. And he sort of explains to her how she can know in advance who she's going to be fighting for the combat trials, because I think there's like 5 weeks or 4 weeks of combat trials, and once a week you sort of have to constantly, you just have to fight and you take a knife from them or something like that. Violet, being Violet, she knows that she can't win through brawn, so she tries to win through brains. And she's out foraging through the forest somehow, unsupervised, whatever. She gets out past curfew, and there she sees Xaden meeting with a bunch of rebels, and a bunch of rebels' kids. Now, the rebels are technically, due to law, not allowed to gather in groups of more than 3. And he's in a group of probably about 10 or 12. And this is sort of concerning for her. She's hidden up in a tree, and she's sort of listening to them talk. What they're doing is they're just sort of talking about how Xaden can help them survive. So he's just offering tricks and tips, which is no big deal. It's not like a huge sign of rebellion. He's not stirring up some uprising. He's just trying to help out his fellow friends. However, it is illegal, and Violet could turn him in for capital punishment if she wanted to, which she ends up not doing. This is one of the first times where Xaden sort of encounters her like directly one-on-one. And when he encounters her, after she climbs down the tree, she thinks he's gone. Xaden just kind of comes from the shadows and kind of like wraps his arm around her. And it's sort of a nice little tense scene where you almost think like, is he actually going to try and kill her? Is that actually going to happen? But it doesn't. But you do learn that Xaden has the ability to control shadows. He's like a shadow manipulator. The closest thing I can think of is like Shikamaru from Naruto. Nothing really happens from this, right? She throws knives at him. He doesn't really blink about it. Xaden isn't really too concerned about her, and she keeps again, she just gushes over this guy all the time. He's so beautiful, he's so deadly. Oh my god, he could kill me right now if he wanted to. It's just constantly on repeat with her, which I don't really mind too much, right? It's I get it, but the thing that really kind of threw me off here is like, you think these people are like teenagers, but they're in their 20s. So when they're behaving like this, it's almost a little weird. They do have a very cute little back and forth here, but my problem with this is that I don't really get the vibe that they're enemies. It doesn't seem like he wants to kill her, because if he did, he is given every reason to right then and there, and he simply doesn't. And another reoccurring theme throughout the book is everybody's just sleeping with each other. Everybody is having sex with everybody except for little old Violet, because Violet, for some reason, she can't seem to get it. She can't seem to get it from anyone. Here's sort of where Violet's plan comes to fruition. Violet, while she was foraging, she was specifically foraging for mushrooms and like tree bark and stuff so that she could make poisons. She's beaten, I think, 5 opponents, and she hasn't killed anyone. She has poisoned them. She has defeated them just because they're kind of loopy or like hallucinating. And still somehow, again, her brittle bone thing doesn't really seem to come up. Like, the most she earns is a couple bruises and I think almost breaks her jaw, something like that. But you get the sense that her brittle bone disease really doesn't seem to be a thing anymore. It's just kind of there so that occasionally she can act weak and frail. But she manages to defeat 5 opponents without killing them, which is kind of impressive because other people have been killing their opponents, like, deliberately. Jack snapped someone's neck for no reason during training. And you kind of get the idea that, oh, okay, everybody's ruthless. For her 6th opponent, she ended up poisoning them too early, and so they just, like, straight up passed out. And what ends up happening is Xaden decides to step in and spar with her. I think is probably the best scene in the entire book if we're taking into account every single facet of the storyline, which is romantasy. It is the enemies to lovers. It is the tension. It's like the sexual chemistry. This is probably the best scene in the entire book by far, because Xaden is, again, she just describes him as just this absolute hunk of a man. He is so... oh my god. And he's about to spar with her. And the implication is that he's probably going to just wipe the floor with her, which he kind of ends up doing, but it's more in a playful way. He goes out of his way to sort of disarm her constantly, flipping her around, pinning her down, you know, and she is, while she's being pinned down, she's just like man, this is kind of hot. And while you're reading it, you kind of get the vibe like, yeah, this is definitely one of those scenes where it's like the tension is there, the chemistry is there. These two characters work great in this specific scene. This scene was really well done. I loved this scene. Even though it's a little weird, he's basically trying to tell her you can't poison your opponents all the time. Sometimes you actually have to fight them. And this is a very good lesson, I think, for Violet as a character, because up until now, she's just using her wits, but wits isn't going to win everything. So it makes sense that he's just sort of putting her in her place. And this is also where Dane gets his first little quip from Xaden, because Xaden's like, you should probably try instructing her instead of protecting her, because she's not up to par. She's not where she needs to be because she's been sort of skirting the lines. Technically not breaking the rules, but Dane, in the immediate conversation after this, is right back to trying to get Violet to dip out of the Riders Quadrant. Over and over and over again. It's so frustrating, just constantly. And then we get to the second main trial, which is I think it's called the Gauntlet. We get to the Gauntlet, which is basically just this like mini obstacle course up the side of a mountain, and they have to scale it because it is meant to simulate climbing on a dragon, but my god, it's totally not. And up until this point, nobody in their squad has died, which they're kind of, whoopee, none of us have died. And you, the reader, you are fully aware that someone is about to die, because you never say like, oh, I can't believe we've all lived, and then expect everybody to live at the end of the chapter. While they're going through this climbing obstacle course, one of the girls, Arieli or something, she falls and dies as a dragon flies overhead. And it's kind of sad, but again, we've been expecting this. Students have been dying left and right. It's not really that surprising. I do want to point out that Xaden has a nickname for Violet that I personally loathe. I hate that his nickname for Violet is Violence. That doesn't even sound like a nickname. All that I don't even know if there's rules about this, but Violence, it'd be like calling someone debauchery or something like that, like as a nickname. It doesn't make sense. Violence as a nickname doesn't make sense. I almost feel like it would have been better if the author just made her name Violence and then Violet became her nickname. That would have made a lot more sense. But also, they switched the name around because randomly he'll call her Violence, and then he'll call her V, which makes sense because V is a nickname for Violet. Xaden basically tells her he doesn't want to kill her, and she's sort of asking for advice because she cannot figure out how to climb the last stretch of the Gauntlet. She has no idea how to do it. She's too short. She's too slow. She just can't get the final stretch. So, which basically means when the day comes that they're supposed to do the Gauntlet, there won't be any like safeties, and she will fall to her death if she can't complete it because there's no way to get down once you start. Xaden basically just tells her there's other ways to win. You don't have to do it the right way. And Violet, she ends up kind of coming up with this idea that's a little ingenious. I'll give it to her. But it also just feels kind of like pulling out of the hat because Violet ends up sort of cheating. She uses her knife, which technically she's not allowed to do. However, Violet quotes this very specific line from the Codex that basically says, if you carried it on your person across the parsible or whatever it is, then technically it counts as part of your person. So since she had her knife on her, that counts as part of who she is, and she's allowed to use it during the test. Now, some random girl, Amber, who I think is implied to be like a thing with Dane, is very against this. She's like, that is absolute cheating. You can't do this. It's ridiculous. Violet cites the Codex to her, and she kind of storms off angrily. Xaden's just kind of like, heh, good job. And pretty much all animosity between these two is pretty much gone. All that Xaden and Violet now do is just kind of just make faces at each other and just go like, damn, you're so hot. And then they just storm away. It's very broody. The next thing that they're supposed to do is they walk through this sort of field where the dragons that are willing to bond for that year come out, and they're sort of gauging the students. And this is a point where I feel like up until this point, a lot of this doesn't make sense because the dragons just sort of decide if they want to kill you. At this point, you're walking through the field, and if the dragons don't like the cut of your jib, they just burn you to death. They're sort of told that while they're walking through the fields, they should sort of talk to each other so that the dragons can kind of get a better feel for them. And it is absurd to me that two people in this in this little group think now is the time to talk trash about Violet and say how she's the weakest link. We should get rid of her. And then they see this Featherwing, and it's implied that the Featherwings are they're total like peace loving dragons. They don't actually want to fight anyone, and they're so small that they can't even have riders. And when they see the Featherwing, some of them are like, "Hey, we should kill that dragon." And it makes, if you think about this just for even a moment, just logically, even slightly, the fact that some of these recruits would immediately default to we should kill the small one doesn't make any sense. But if you try and say like, oh well, they're sort of drilled with this like, oh, the strength is what matters most sort of thing, whatever, they're still talking about killing a dragon. And you have to think, would the dragons be okay with you killing one of their own? Probably not. The two students that basically do this, they end up getting burned alive. Hooray. And during this time, Violet also gets approached by these two green dragons, and they're sort of sniffing her, but it's just because she has the scale armor from her sister's dragon, and they sort of recognize the scent, and everything's fine. Now, next is the threshing, and the threshing is when the dragons get bonded to their actual riders, and this is sort of them going into a field, and they're just supposed to try to find a dragon that wants to be with them, and if the dragon doesn't want to be with them, one of two things will happen. It will kill them, or it will just sort of ignore them. So Violet goes through the fields, and she like encounters a red dragon, and nothing's really happening. She sort of sees the glint of the gold from the Featherwing, and you sort of think like, oh, you're sort of led to believe that Violet is going to be bonded with the Featherwing because it's weak, it's small, it sort of embodies who she is kind of as a person, at least in what we're told through the narrative. So you're thinking like, okay, she's gonna end up with the gold one. But then Jack and two of her squad mates, or just two guys, they disembark on a mission that she overhears, and she doesn't want them to see her because they will kill her, and they're totally allowed to do that, which makes no sense. They embark on a mission to kill the gold dragon. They embark on the mission to kill the featherweight, and you're just thinking, this makes no sense. There's no way that these three guys think that killing a dragon is a good idea, but they do. They honestly do, and they are committed to doing it. They sort of go to try and kill the dragon. Violet sort of comes out, and she tries to make the dragon leave. The dragon doesn't want to leave, so she sort of announces herself to the three guys, and they all decide that they're going to kill her first and then kill the dragon. But at this time, Xaden walks up. Oh my god, Xaden's there, and Xaden has his dragon, and his dragon is one of the biggest and baddest, and his dragon's just rawr, so you don't want to mess with it, because the dragon's just like Xaden, and super, super cool. But Xaden, legally, according to the rules, is not allowed to step in and help her, because he is her wing leader, he has a dragon, this is the threshing, this is what this is all about. So Violet 1v3s. She sort of throws a knife at Jack. He gets like stabbed in the shoulder, and then he just immediately runs off and runs away, leaving her to fight the other two, which she barely manages to defeat. One, this massive shadow descends, and the black dragon, this is a dragon that was alluded to earlier, that has never bonded with anyone because its last rider allegedly died while trying to save her brother, Brennan. The dragon lands, and it basically torches one of the guys, threatens to kill the other one. Violet says she doesn't want it because the dragon's talking to her mentally, which is an implication that they're now bonded. The dragon's bonded with her. She is chosen. She has no real option in this. The dragon sort of tells her to climb on. She argues with him about it, like, you should pick someone else, which I don't really like this part of Violet's character because this is such a huge opportunity, and she's just like, oh, I'm not worthy, and it's just a little annoying. Eventually she gets on. She encounters this problem where she is constantly almost falling off the dragon, so the dragon has to use magic to keep her tethered in place. That's another point that's going to come up later. She flies the dragon down. She lands in front of the scribe or whatever who's jotting down the names of the dragons. So the rider has to say the full name of the dragon in order to prove that they are bonded. She lands, and the dragon telepathically tells her his name. She gives the name to the scribe, and then the gold dragon also gives her name, and the gold dragon's a girl. Violet becomes one of the first people to bond two dragons, and this causes a huge issue because it's never been allowed before. But as we come to learn, The dragons don't follow human rules. The dragons sort of gather together as a council, and they decide it doesn't matter. It's whatever. The dragon's allowed to do whatever the dragon wants. Violet now has 2 paired dragons. And despite this, Dane is still telling her that she shouldn't do this, which is absurd to me. You learn that Jack bonded with dragons. Pretty much everyone from her squad bonded with the dragon. Everything's great. Everyone's happy. Everyone has sex again. Violet gets her signet from the dragon, or her sigil or whatever, which is like a magical tattoo, more or less. This is sort of where she learns that the dragon she has is bonded with Xaden's dragon, meaning those 2 dragons can never be far away from each other. They are hopelessly in love. Yeah, so she's kind of forced to be around Xaden all the time. Dane decides to kiss her at this point, and this is sort of where Violet decides that she used to really want him, but now she doesn't want him at all because she wants Xaden. Everybody's sort of unlocking their signet abilities, and the signet abilities are basically when the dragon bonds with you, it can start channeling its power into you, which helps you perform lesser magic. But if you never unlock your signet, the magic will build up in your body and you'll basically explode or die. And a lot of people have already unlocked theirs, and Violet hasn't unlocked hers. She tries to fly. She keeps falling off. The dragon's telling her that she should just let him hold her in place, and she's like, no. And the dragon also kind of has the same personality as everyone else, which you'll come to learn is kind of like one of my gripes with this, is that most of these characters all kind of are the same. Now, Violet goes to the archives, and she's looking for this book that her father used to read to her about myths and legends, and it turns out that book doesn't exist in the archive, the vast archives. They have no idea what this book is, but Violet has a copy at home that she really wants. Once more, Dane and Violet get into another argument. It's just so absurd to even think that Dane actually likes Violet, considering how he talks to her. It's almost like he babies her all the time. A character ends up having a signet ability where he can read minds, and for that, he starts like listing off secrets and like telling what everybody's thinking, and then another professor just comes out of nowhere and snaps his neck, and it's because abilities that can read the mind are considered far too dangerous for recruits to have, or something like that, because you basically have unfettered access to everyone's thoughts. Violet wakes up in the middle of the night thanks to the dragon telepathically telling her she needs to wake up right now. And when she wakes up, she is like hit by a sword that deflects off of her scale armor. Her scale armor is plot armor at this point. It has saved her so many times that it's kind of ridiculous because it's basically impenetrable. But she sort of rolls around and she discovers that there's 8 people in her room, and all of them are riders that didn't get dragons. And so they're kind of hoping that they can kill her to make the dragon want one of them, which makes no sense, but we're going to go with it anyway. She's also kind of confused about how they got into her room, and it's because someone with magic who's bound to a dragon unlocked her door, which they're not allowed to do, because it's one of the main rules in this thing is you can't kill someone when they're asleep. You have to kill them like legally. Violet sort of narrowly escapes here. The guy that's trying to kill her is the guy that she spared during the threshing. She spared a guy despite the dragon telling her to kill him, and despite Xaden telling her to kill him. And we kind of see here that Violet has this very annoying habit where she really doesn't want to kill anyone for any reason whatsoever. And it's so absurd when you consider how many times people have tried to kill her that she's unwilling to defend herself in the future. She's sort of about to die, more or less, and she's fighting off these people. They're basically about to kill her. There's no way she can survive. Xaden's on his way, but he's a little slow. And then Violet sort of unlocks one of her abilities, which is from the Golden Dragon, and she freezes time. She freezes time long enough to get herself out of a chokehold, and then time unstops, and Xaden is there, and he slaughters everyone in the room and kills them with his shadow powers. Xaden and Violet sort of go down to the dragon area, and they talk directly with the dragon. And here's where they learn that the Featherwing is not a breed of dragon. It is actually a hatchling. It is a young dragon, and young dragons can't control how much of their magic they give, so they just give everything. So by using the time-stopping ability, her dragon, the gold one, is forced to sleep for like a week to kind of recuperate. There's like this implication that the dragon might be the offspring of Xaden's dragon and Violet's dragon, but it's not. It's just an adoptive dragon. And then in the next scene, Xaden sort of accuses Amber, who's the girl from the gauntlet that accused Violet of cheating. He accuses her of, trying to kill someone when they're asleep, which she denies. And then Violet asks her dragon to share the memories with pretty much everyone, and she's outed to be a traitor. She tried to kill Violet when she was asleep, and that's not allowed. Once more, we have Violet begging for Amber's life. And this, again, doesn't make sense because Amber was so willing to let her die pretty much twice over, and Violet is still like, no, give her a chance. And the dragon doesn't, and it kills her. At this point, Xaden sort of decides to appoint Violet with a permanent bodyguard because he's not allowed to be around her all the time. And he gives her this guy named Liam, who is like the best fighter in their class and blah, blah, blah. And he's also a rebel. They just make a bunch of dick jokes. Xaden and his boy Garen, basically, they're both shirtless and they're both sparring. And we need a whole portion of the book to pause and talk about how absolutely ripped and hot these guys look. It's very important. One of the main things that happens between Dane and Violet is when Xaden accused Amber in front of like the whole quadrant that she did treachery, Dane didn't believe her. Dane didn't believe Violet. He said she was basically lying. And it makes no sense considering, they're best friends or whatever. But Dane is also confronted with the reality that if Violet violated the Codex, he would have let her die. And that's something that Xaden says he wouldn't do. Dane sort of means it too. So I don't understand why we even have this guy as a friend anymore, because he's basically saying that he's totally willing to let you die if the rules demand it. Spoiler alert, And now we begin to channel. And this is probably the, I would say, the second best scene of the book, because there is nothing funnier to me than what happens in this next scene, because Violet is being channeled. She can sort of hear the thoughts of her dragon. She can hear the thoughts of Xaden's dragon. What ends up happening is the two dragons are basically having sex, right? Like two dragons having sex. And because Violet doesn't really understand how to tune out the emotional side of the dragons, she's just hit with this wave of lust, and she's basically horny again. And she doesn't really know what to do. She's sort of like trying to figure out how to deal with it. She doesn't know how to deal with it. It's like, I'm so good. I want to boink everyone. And she encounters Xaden because of course she does. And I think he's like smoking weed or something, or like the fantasy equivalent of weed. And he sort of coaches her on how to like tune it out. And this is the first part where they actually kiss. And we're on page 278. This is their very first kiss. They kiss, and it's kind of implied to be solely fueled by the two dragons boinking, and they're overcome with lust based on that. But Violet also implies that, she tuned out the dragon, and now all she's feeling is her own lust. Xaden kind of pushes away, and he's like, I can't do this because it doesn't count as consent, and the desire isn't yours or something like that. But, we all know that it definitely is, because Violet has been doing nothing but drool over this guy for the last 200 pages. Violet and Dane sort of reconcile, but not really. And now we have another moment where Jack is going to fight Violet on the mat. Now, what you might be thinking is that due to Jack being a superior fighter and generally ruthless, he's probably going to kill Violet. But what have we learned so far is that Violet has been training to sort of overcome this. She's been trying to get stronger. She's been training on the mat with her friend Riri. Everybody's basically trying to help Violet become the best version of herself. When she ends up fighting Jack, this is absurd, and I'm just going to say it just because I feel the need to. She basically ends up cheating again. And this is because in an earlier scene, right, for some reason, someone offers Jack an orange, and he's like, gross, get that thing away from me. And it's like implied that he's like super allergic to them. So Violet sort of, while they're fighting, stuffs a friggin' orange something in his mouth and he goes into anaphylactic shock, but he's still not dead because Violet doesn't like killing people. The squad games happen or whatever, and the squad games are just like the squad battles. They're just like these I don't even know what's implied, but it's a points ranking system, and whoever's the top ends up getting this mission to go to the outpost or something like that. They're all sort of coming up with ideas because they're given a task of like find something that would help your enemies destroy us or something like that. And of course, Violet comes up with a plan, and her plan is to break into her mother's office and steal the map there, which they do with a MacGyvering use of all their unique signet abilities because Violet doesn't have one. They get the map, they win the day, they've won the things. Hooray! While she's at the outpost for their victory, Violet encounters Mira, her sister, and they sort of have this thing where Mira's like, hey, you should stay away from Xaden. And no matter what Violet does, nobody seems to like Xaden at all. Everybody seems to hate him. Everybody seems to mistrust him, even though he's saved her multiple times. And she keeps telling everybody like, hey, he's a nice guy. He's saving me. Nobody really seems to care. They go through a sort of mock battle here. And here's where we also learn that Xaden can talk to her through her mind because they're linked. The outpost gets attacked by the enemies, which are basically griffins, more or less. Violet is forced to leave her sister. Xaden complies with this order to like get Violet out of there because he thinks she's not going to live. She can't even stay in the back of her dragon, blah, blah, blah. And Violet is just being kind of unreasonable here, where she's like, I'll hate you forever if you do this, and he does it, blah, blah, blah. They sort of have this awkward like hating moment back and forth where it's kind of implied that he hates her, she hates him. At least she learns that her sister is quote unquote alive. Now that they've figured out their mind talkiness, Violet tries to have like conversations with Xaden just to learn a little bit more about him, but he's always really closed off and secretive. For the war games, which are kind of the next big thing, is Violet's squad is put against the first squad, which has Jack in it. Xaden ends up building a harness for Violet's dragon that allows her to ride it without falling off, because that's been her biggest thing, and she doesn't want to use it even though she absolutely needs it. They're given this thing to like protect an egg and defend a flag or capture a flag or something like that. They're flying around, whatever. Liam's dragon is sort of being attacked by Jack. Jack jumps from the back of his dragon and stabs Liam. This is sort of the moment where Violet finally uses her signet power, and for the first time, Violet, while atop the back of her dragon, basically calls down lightning, and the lightning evaporates Jack, and she has killed someone, which she will feel bad about for way too long, because Jack was a total piece of shit. She just keeps repeating how bad lightning is. Everybody's telling her it's the most powerful thing on the planet. You're so useful now. You can do so much stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Violet's just kind of in her room. She's still brooding over this fact, and she's just throwing knives and being angry. But then Xaden comes in, and we finally get the first sex scene on page 374, which is quite a bit deep into the book. And the only thing that I'll say about this sex scene that I really don't like is their dialogue. This is some of the cringiest dialogue I've ever read in romance fiction and romantasy in general. I'm so over it. It's just, there's so many times where it's literally just a back and forth of this. Stop. Don't tell me to stop. I can't stop even if I wanted to. I don't know if I'll be able to stop. Tell me to stop. Don't stop. Whatever you do, tell me to stop. I can't control myself. It's just constant throughout the entire scene. They have really, really rough sex, but again, don't worry, because Violet's brittle bone thing is pretty much a thing of the past. We don't even need to worry about it anymore. Violet and Xaden are now just having these sort of cheeky little conversations with each other, because Xaden doesn't really want to go into a committed relationship with her due to the fact that he feels like he's going to get separated, and he doesn't really want to start like a deep emotional relationship when he's going to graduate and then go away, and she's going to have to stay for 2 years, and their dragons can't be apart for that long. And it's just like blah, 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 melodramatic. Like, we all know they're going to end up together. It doesn't matter. They just have this weird, we don't need this. We don't want to do this. We can't keep doing this back and forth. And they basically don't bang. Um, they have this little ball or whatever where it's sort of revealed that none of the rebellious kids are there, and it's only all the prompt ones or whatever. And Violet goes there with Liam, who has survived his wound from Jack, and he's sort of just like, everybody hates him because he's a rebellious kid. Eventually, Violet sort of decides she's going to go find Xaden, and we're going to solve this issue right now. She goes back up to the parapet where Xaden is, because Xaden has decided he wants to brood over a dark cliff in the rain, basically. They just have this back and forth of like, I can't stop needing you. We can't keep doing this. This is so, I have to give myself to you. And he's just like, you put yourself in danger by coming here and blah, 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 just constantly back and forth. It's melodramatic. And like I said, the second half of this book is kind of where it falls apart for me, because this is just, it's repetitive. It's boring. It's almost like they both don't know how to express emotions to each other at all, despite being intimately connected with how each other feel. Eventually, they decide, okay, we're gonna give this thing a shot. They have sex again. Hooray! Not really as interesting. After they boink, they're told like, oh my god, we're under attack, and they all assemble. And this is actually the beginning of the War Games. The War Games is sort of simulated combat. Xaden sort of tells Dane, who's very upset, that he's going to be taking Violet with him to go on his mission, as opposed to with the other squads. And this is due to the fact that Violet, she has a very strong signet power, and they need it. And Dane is kind of like, Dane's acting very weird, and the phrasing that he uses on this is such a dead giveaway. It's like, it's not even trying to hide sort of a twist. But before they go, Dane says, I'll miss you. And that's sort of weird. They fly for a little bit, they land, and then they're like, oh, we only have like 10 minutes before something happens. So they're about to like bang, but then griffins arrive. Oh my god, the griffins arrive, and it seems like there's going to be a fight. But actually, Xaden knows who they are, and they're talking, and Violet suddenly feels betrayed. So it turns out that Xaden and his boys have been supplying the griffins with weapons. The weapons are forged from something that creates like their magical barriers, and those weapons are the only things that can defeat the venin. And the venin were in the folklore book from her father that talked about like the venin and wyverns and all this. And it turns out they're actually real. Those are real things that exist, and they are sort of people that have they've sapped magic from the ground or something, and they're soulless basically, and they create wyverns from their own magic, as opposed to dragon riders who create magic from dragons, etc., etc. Xaden's trying to explain to Violet this sort of bombshell of a truth, which is that beyond the borders there has been a war going on, and the venin have been like basically ruthlessly attacking them. So the twist is that the rebellion was actually pretty warranted, because the king decided that he just didn't really want to help the rest of the world, I guess. You sort of get little snippets of this earlier in the book where they find like battle reports that don't really match up with what they're being taught, but it's sort of explained away as like, oh, we can't tell you every single battle. The venin are real, and Xaden has been secretly selling them weapons so that they can defend themselves, and this is where Violet kind of thinks he's a traitor. She's like, you've been lying to me this whole time. And it turns out all the dragons knew too, and she was the only one that didn't know. And really, you're just trying to think like, does it kind of make sense that Xaden wouldn't tell her? No, it really doesn't. It doesn't make any sense, considering she already has enough ammunition on him to get him like capitally executed if she wanted. But he doesn't tell her. And we later learn that he really regrets this. But this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Xaden is kind of helping the rebellion in a sense. And also, the rebellion's not that bad. Shocker. Now, we also learn earlier in the book that Dane has this ability where he can read your recent memories if he touches you. He's touched Violet a few times. I don't know if you know that. And she believes that he hasn't used her memories to work against her, but he has. And he's basically betrayed them, blah, blah, blah. It's actually the government, more or less, that has sort of betrayed them. They put them in this impossible situation where they have to defend this point that is being beset on by venin, like 4 venom mages or something with wyverns are attacking this city because they want some hidden rune or something inside it, and they're killing a whole bunch of civilians. They're all sort of forced to work together. Violet decides that this is, she's going to help them fight. They fight, and they're fighting the magic, and the venom or whatever are completely immune to dragon fire. They have wyverns that are basically gray dragons, but they only have 2 feet instead of 4. They have to use their daggers specifically to kill them because the dragon fire doesn't work. Violet, despite having the strongest power, can't seem to aim it. She can only really seem to use it when she's having sex or when she's like really upset. She's trying to use it, but she's not really hitting anything. This big battle sequence happens. Liam gets killed because his dragon dies. His dragon dies while trying to save Violet, and because of that, because they're bound together, Liam dies soon after. This is where Violet sort of decides she's gonna like change the whatever. She fights this girl who like stabs her with like a poison dagger. She ends up using her signet to like destroy the other Vernon, and all the wyverns die. Everything's kind of yippee. We're almost done. Then we're kind of treated to Violet sort of having these sort of like, oh, I'm gonna die. This is terrible because she's been poisoned. She's slowly dying. And then we switch perspectives to Xaden, and Xaden is basically just like, dang, this is all my fault. Oh, she's the most perfect woman I've ever met. Oh, if only she was still there. Oh my god, I this is all my fault. I can't believe I've done this. Blah blah blah. I should have been honest with her. At the very end of the book, it's revealed that the person who healed her was actually her brother, Brennan, who everyone thought was dead, but also Violet still doesn't trust Xaden because he lied to her about that one thing. Okay, I do believe that there are some valid criticisms for Violet and the way that she acts. First and foremost, I would say that the book seems to be written like a modern twist on fantasy. The voice of the narrator is so obnoxiously 21st century that it's kind of annoying sometimes, because you would think that like someone in a fantasy dragon world probably wouldn't talk like this, but she does. She talks like that. And I wouldn't really have too much of an issue with it because, like I said, the first half of the book is like pretty good, and it loses momentum so sharply in the second half. Almost every single character, aside from Dane, acts the exact same. Everyone's quippy, everyone's like snarky, everyone has like a snappy one-liner to throw in. I do think that Violet as a character isn't too bad. She's really not as bad as people make her out to be, up until the constantly sparing people, the like the do-gooder personality that does not match up with the way she talks and the way she like behaves. None of it does. Her resignment to use her powers, it's all like so it's just so like it crumbles, because I feel like in the very beginning, right when she gets to that scene with Xaden and they're sparring, I feel like it made sense for him to talk to her the way that he did, because she was definitely trying to use her brains entirely and not use any sort of combat skills whatsoever in order to succeed. But then they just kind of backtracked, and Violet becomes Violet, I guess. The story itself is pretty just generic. There's not really a whole lot of sharp turns. I guessed pretty much every plot twist, including the brothers still being alive. That was not shocking to me, because as soon as I heard the story in the little lore about it, the first thing I thought was, okay, either the brother ended up turning into a bad person that is evil, or he's still alive and this is all just a big cover-up. Because it's very easy to tell when a book's sort of going in the government has lied to you direction, and this book is pretty much straight up going in that direction. The dragons don't make a lot of sense to me, and the killing of the candidates doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, especially if we're like in a waning war effort. I don't understand why we're killing everybody and we're letting people literally push each other off a mountain. Like, what are we doing? That doesn't make any sense. It's such a waste of a life. It's like, yeah, well, you've been training for this your whole life. So if someone behind you wants to push you off a rock, you're dead. Good luck. Should have been better next time. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. In terms of the writing in this, there are some points in this book where I genuinely felt like it wasn't edited properly. One of the main things is the repeated use of the word, I think it's indignant. It's like the only word that Violet knows because she uses it so often to talk about herself that it just pisses me off. It genuinely annoys me that it appears so many times. All authors sort of have this word that they kind of hang on to sometimes when they're writing. That's definitely the word for Rebecca here. There's other points where the sentence structure doesn't make sense. Let me see if I can find one. Oh, here's one. This is like a point where like the sentence and the dialogue doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to read it out loud so you can hear what I'm saying. His voice is raw as he pleads. I watched my own father executed trying to help these people. I couldn't risk you too. That doesn't I watched my own father executed trying to help these people. I watched my own father be executed trying to help these people. I watched my own father get executed trying to help these people. Because my own father helped these people, he was executed. There are so many different ways to word that sentence, and the way that this is worded, it does not make sense. Another main thing, generally the writing isn't terrible. It's not awful. It's way better than a Court of Thorns and Roses. The enemies to lovers plot, it's disproven throughout the entire book. As a matter of fact, there doesn't really seem a point where these two were ever truly enemies. There's never a point where Xaden seemingly really wanted to kill her, which kind of just defeats the whole purpose of the trope. Because when at the very end of the book, it switches to Xaden's perspective, and he basically says, from the moment he saw her, he was all about her. From the moment he saw her switch boots with someone, he was in love with her. This was all he's ever wanted. She's the most brilliant, perfect person he's ever known. So the whole book with him like implying that he wants to kill her and her being afraid of him doesn't make her being afraid of him in this book genuinely baffles me, because so many times he's like, I'm not going to kill you. And she's just like, God, he's going to kill me. He could kill me whenever he wants. Man, I sure hope he doesn't kill me right now. Oh, he could kill me right now if he wanted to. Just constantly throughout the book. But he has never once even so much as hurt her. So it doesn't make any sense. Like, she calls him toxic, but he doesn't hurt her at any point. Aside from, okay, there's a bunch of slight little editorial differences I would make in this book because I don't like the way it's written in certain areas. I don't think it's that bad of a book. The only thing that I see that everybody says online is that Violet is a terrible main character, which I disagree with in the first half of the book. I think she is a good main character in the first half of the book, albeit she is a very, very horny character, and everybody in this book pretty much only talks about sex. She's a pretty decent character in the first half of the book. As we go into the second half, the growth sort of stops, and her power just becomes kind of like this MacGuffin, and nothing really happens. And her constant mistrust of Xaden after, honestly, he explained himself fully, doesn't make any sense. It's like a miscommunication trope that's done in the way of, it's not miscommunication, it's just one party being stubborn as shit, and it's annoying. Overall, the book isn't terrible. I do see how people say, like, everybody in this book is kind of childish and teenager, and they don't really act like adults. I agree. The professors, they just kind of take up space. They don't really do anything, and they're also just sort of there. There are some good chemistry scenes between Xaden and Violet, specifically when they're sparring, and the dragon sex scene is so funny. I hate the nickname. They're the inconsistency with the nicknames, both in the narrative and the right. So sometimes in the book, Rihanna, or whatever her name is, Violet will refer to her as Ree in the narrative, and then refer to her as Rihanna on the same page later in the narrative. And that's just an inconsistency that bugs the hell out of me. Because if we're going to call a character Ree, we're going to give her a nickname, we should stick to that nickname throughout the narrative, because that is the name that the character is choosing to refer to them as. Violet switches between nicknames constantly, and so does everybody else. They call her V. Xaden calls her V, then Violence, and then they constantly back and forth. And the dragon refers to her as Silver One instead of her name, which even that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but whatever. There's a lot of small issues I have with this. It was not nearly as bad as I thought it would be. Honestly, the first half of the book is pretty decent, and it's even interesting enough that I'm willing to read the next one, which I can't say the same for A Court of Rose and Thorn or Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm not interested enough to read the second book. This book actually made me want to kind of read the next one, and I did order it just because I was like, I kind of want to see. But the criticism that it gets is, I would say, 50-50. I think a lot of people hate on this book for odd reasons, like them killing the cadets, tyrannical government doing tyrannical government things. This is a very common trope in pretty much every dark academia or military sci-fi, is that the candidates are being killed, and it doesn't make sense to waste them, but it's like, oh, we're trying to harden you. But then the dragons don't really seem to care about that, so it's like, why even bother? There's a lot going on. TLDR, I would say this book, probably, I would give it maybe like a oh, what did I give? It's better than A Court of Thorns and Roses. It's probably a 7, I would say. And that's just on the romantasy scale, right? As a romantasy book, knowing what it is, knowing what it's trying to accomplish, I think it's probably like a 7. The only reason it doesn't get a higher score is because Xaden isn't actually her enemy at any point, and I feel like that kind of ruins it for me. But I did like enjoy it decently. It wasn't terrible.